Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of Choices Finding Your Joy. Paula Vail here. I am just overwhelmed and excited to share with you an amazing woman who does so much for women around the world. Today, I have Jill Tietjen with us. She is not only the author of an amazing book called Her Story of Timeline of Amazing Women in History. We're going to talk about that great book. She's also the CEO of Technically Speaking, Inc. So I'm just so excited. And first off, welcome, Jill. Welcome.
Thank you, Paula. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
Oh, so happy to have you here. First off, tell us a bit about yourself and let's jump into this amazing book. I'm excited to share.
Well, thank you.
Brought mine with me. Yes.
When I speak around the country, the way I get introduced is I get introduced as an author, a speaker, and an electrical engineer. And then everyone in the audience, just like you are doing, laughs because it's so incongruous for women to think that another woman could be an electrical engineer. Yeah. But that was what my career has been for 40 years. But at the same time, I was very active in an organization called the Society of Women Engineers. And I started learning about historical women engineers and scientists to put together an essay contest for kids on great women in engineering and science. And that led to nominations for awards for technical women. It led to my affiliation with the National Women's Hall of Fame, and it led to the book, Her Story, A Timeline of the Women Who Changed America. That's the very, very short version. Of course, people say, well, how long did it take you to write the book? Mm-hmm. And the answer is 5 years, not counting the 16 years that it took to get ready to write the book. And so I have turned into really one of the predominant women historians in the U.S. on women in engineering and science, but I'm also actually becoming pretty much an advocate for women across every field of endeavor, now not just in the U.S., but actually around the world.
Yes. I love it. And tell us a bit about the book. I have to say, after I received the book and sat down to start going, I gave this book a lot of time. I would sit and I would go through each page and just, it took my breath away. These women, some women I would recognize, some I wouldn't. I was really intrigued with, Catherine Blodgett.
She's fabulous.
Yes, she created the non-breakable glass that we have on cell phones.
Oh, right, exactly. The non-reflecting glass. And the really cool story about Catherine Blodgett is her patent was in 1938 for this non-reflective glass. Like actually what we're using today on our lenses for the television recording. And in 1939, one of the first uses of her non-reflective glass was for the movie camera lenses to record Gone with the Wind.
Oh my gosh.
Oh. And so it's just so fascinating, the things that we don't know, the women that we don't know. There are more than 850 women in the book, Her Story, A Timeline of the Women Who Changed America, starting in 1587 and going through 2011. As you know, it's a beautiful, beautiful book in a timeline format, and Madeleine Albright wrote the foreword. And I speak all over the country, and what women tell me, and men too, but what women tell me time after time after time, how come we don't know these women? And how much validation it provides for them to see all of these women through history and to understand that they overcame such significant barriers, such significant obstacles, from women who fought for the right to not be slaves anymore, to women who fought for the right to vote for 72 years, for women who fought for the right for us to own our own property, to own our own homes, to own our own cars, to be able to control our wages, on and on and on. And then women from artists to entrepreneurs, to singers, to television producers, to movie directors, to actors, across to athletes, across astronauts, across the entire field of women's endeavor in a beautiful, accessible format. You said you spent a lot of time with it. Well, that might scare off people who want to look at the book, because you can read about one woman at a time.
Mm-hmm.
One woman was telling me she was trying to brush her teeth, and because she was getting ready to go to bed. And she said, "Oh, I'll just do one more page. I gotta go brush my teeth. No, I'll just do one more page. No, I gotta go brush my teeth." Because really, the information is so accessible, and you can read about one woman, or you can read about the one page. Some pages have one woman, some pages have 6 women, some pages have 4 women. It depends on what the design was at that point in time. And it's very accessible because there are 2 indexes in the back. One is by profession. So let's just say that you have a member of your family and she thinks that she wants to be a fashion designer. You just go to the index in the back of the book and you look up fashion designers. Or she wants to be a governor, or she wants to be a business entrepreneur. You just go to that index. And there's also an alphabetical index so that people can say, oh, let's see if this particular person is in the book.
Yes.
Or not.
Yes. And I'm finding everyone, I was like, oh, I want to read more about them. I want to find out more about them. It's exhilarating. I mean, women that have done things and accomplished things that we just don't know about. It's so exciting.
It's really fascinating. I was on a radio program years ago in San Diego, actually, and one of the callers called in and said, well, I know the woman who established the first kindergarten. It was in St. Louis in 1960. Well, actually, no. It was Elizabeth Peabody. It was in Boston, and it was in 1860. And that's so and once you know it's Elizabeth Peabody, you can go find out more information about her. Yes, this book is not meant to be a comprehensive information source. It is meant to be enough information at someone's fingertips so they can say, oh, how come I didn't know that this person did that? And now I can go find out more information about her. Because one of the things that's very important to know is that American history textbooks, the ones that we use in our schools, mm-hmm. usually the content is 90% male. Sometimes 95%, sometimes 99%. And so we don't learn about these women. We've learned about a handful of women, but this book gives people access to, oh, now I know who someone is, and now I can go find out more information about her.
Yes, it's a forever book. It is. It's a forever book. And as you mentioned, you know, because I'm thinking I'm going to get a copy for all my girlfriends. I can't wait to share it with them. But, you know, 2 years down the road, you may think, I think I want to get into this industry. Or my niece is thinking of, you know, being a chemist or getting into something along that line. Let's look at some of the women that have done that. Oh my gosh, it's just huge.
Right. And what I say is that what this book allows women to do is to find someone like them. I was speaking at the Kansas City Public Library, and there were 2 young women about 10 years old in the front row. And one of them during the Q&A raised her hand and she said, are there any swimmers in the book? Because she was a swimmer. Everyone wants to see a woman in the book who is like her. And then the little girl next to her said, what about soccer players? Do you have any soccer players in the book? And I was on a plane with a man who said, well, I'm a golfer. Do you have any golfers in the book?
Yeah.
People always want to see that there is someone who is like me, who has achieved. And so if I am like this person, then I can achieve too.
Yes.
And that's actually a pretty important message. Charlotte Waisman, my co-author, and I started the introduction to the book with the Margaret Mead quote, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." Which actually, when you break it down and ask what it means, is that it only takes one person to make a change in the world, and anyone can be that person.
Yes. It's just, it just, the only way I can describe it, it literally about takes my breath away reading about some of these women, and so many were an example, just as you mentioned. That one woman made a change that affected women after that. And
absolutely. And of course, I like to talk about the suffragists because when you think about what they did, 1848, the first Women's Rights Convention, women didn't win the right to vote. The 19th Amendment wasn't ratified until August 26, 1920. That was 72 years. When we think about these women and what they did for us, their passion, their determination, their persistence, 72 years is a long time. And only one of the women who actually was at that first Women's Rights Convention was alive when women got the right to vote with the 19th Amendment. And so when you think about, they didn't live to see it, but they knew that this had to be done, and they knew that they had to do it. And so it's very empowering to read about woman after woman after woman who did what she did because she was passionate. But then, it doesn't work the first time. For most of us, things don't work the first time. You have to try the second time. You have to try the third time. And you have to keep on trying.
Yes. Yes.
And that's what these women do. They really just give us. There's a woman I really like. Her name is Eliza Lucas Pinckney. She's in the book in 1744. In 1744, her mother has already died, and her father is off in the military in the Caribbean, and she is running 3 plantations in Charleston, South Carolina. And she decides that she's going to figure out how to commercialize indigo. Well, everything that we have that is blue requires indigo dye. And she figured out how to commercialize it in South Carolina, except that was before South and North Carolina were split. And then that indigo product sustained the economy of the Carolinas until the outbreak of the Revolutionary War. And we don't learn about these women. We don't learn about their accomplishments. And that's my personal mission, to tell women's stories and to make sure that we know what the accomplishments of women are.
What a beautiful mission, Jill. I have to say thank you on behalf of so many for you to bring this information out. It is just so inspiring.
Well, thank you. You asked me earlier, how did this start? And I didn't really give you very much of an answer, but I was elected to the National Board of the Society of Women Engineers, and after having done all this research on great women in engineering and science for an essay contest as an outreach program, and the president held up the nomination forms for the National Medal of Science and the National Medal of Technology that none of us in the room had heard of. Probably most of your viewers have not heard of it either. The U.S. equivalent of the Nobel Prize awarded by the President of the United States. The woman who was the president of the Society of Women Engineers asked for a volunteer. 17 women in that room, and no one raised her hand. So I did. And in September of 1991, I was at the White House Rose Garden to receive Admiral Grace Murray Hopper's National Medal of Technology, the first individual woman to receive that award. You and I could not be conversing today without her accomplishment, which was the development of the computer compiler, which is the software that allows humans to talk to computers in our languages instead of the zeros and ones that a computer understands. I'm on an iPad talking to you. And you're on a computer. Neither one of them would have been possible to start with, never mind all of the apps that we have and all of the software that we have now without Admiral Hopper's invention of the computer compiler. And she, the first individual woman to receive it, and I was at the White House Rose Garden going, well, A, we don't know her, and B, how can there only be one woman? There can't only be one woman. And so we have to start nominating women for awards. We have to start telling women stories. We have to start publicizing their accomplishments. And so that's what I'm doing.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Oh, thank you, Jill. I love it. And I would love to ask you also, something that you talk about is you specialize in energizing ideas. Tell us about that.
I spent my career, which I guess I'm still in, partly, sort of, 40 years in the electric utility industry. Mm-hmm. So as an electrical engineer, I actually helped plan power plants. So coal, nuclear, natural gas, solar, wind, hydroelectric, geothermal, the entire range of possibilities for power plants. And I actually testified in regulatory proceedings and wrote testimony and wrote reports, was pretty involved in the regulatory process. Mm-hmm. And so when the person that developed my logo for me, when I formed Technically Speaking, when we were talking about what made sense, he said, well, let's bring it. And I wanted it. That's what the Technically Speaking is. It's both the technical part of my life and the speaking and writing part of my life. And so that was the energizing ideas, was kind of bringing both of those parts together, both the energy background that I have, as well as my ideas, which of course are now very devoted to advocacy for women.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Do you see yourself doing a second book down the road?
I'm actually, okay, so just to be clear, Her Story, A Timeline of the Women Who Changed America was actually my 5th book. There have been 3 more books published, not in the same series, but some along the same lines since Her Story came out. And I am actually now currently working on 2 more Her Story volumes. One is, well, we don't know. In the end, the publishing company actually has the ability to change the title to anything they want. But the working title for one of them is Her Story, A Timeline of the Women Who Changed the Movies. So actors, directors, producers, screenwriters, editors, choreographers, sound, animators, visual effects, stunt women, the whole, and then scholars and technical advances and gossip columnists and film critics, all women. And my co-author and I, it's a different co-author, we've gathered 1,200 names so far on that book, and that's in process. And then actually, the night that we launched Her Story, A Timeline of the Women Who Changed America at the Tattered Cover in Denver, and that's actually filmed, and you can watch it on C-SPAN Book TV, one of the questions that we were asked was, well, what about the other countries around the world?
Oh, my goodness. Yes.
And so right now, I'm actually working with a different co-author than either of the other ones on Her Story for all the African countries.
Oh, wow. That's going to be something.
It's really amazing. I'm a lifelong learner. I love the learning process. I love the research process. It's fascinating. I get really excited when I find one of the images. As we said, Her Story, A Timeline of the Women Who Changed America is beautiful, over 1,000 images. Mm-hmm. And these other books will have images as well. And when you find one and it's beautiful and you really like it and, you know, it's indicative of what you're trying to convey, then it's just a fabulous experience, and I just get so excited about it.
And Jill, I love that you have the images, because, you know, you read about that woman and then you see her and you can make that connection as well. Wow, that is the woman that accomplished this.
Right, and what's very important is that we look at these women in this book, and some of us say, well, I could never be that woman. And that's wrong. Mm-hmm. Every one of us can be that woman, because then when you look at the picture, she's just a regular person. You know, the way I like to say it in engineering, because of course so many engineers are men. Men put their pants on one leg at a time. Well, we put our pantyhose on one leg at a time. These women are real women. They are women like us. They are women who had issues. They had tragedies in their life. They had accomplishments in their life. Good things happened to them. Bad things happened to them. And yet they had this passion and this determination and this persistence to the point that now we remember who they are and we thank them for what their accomplishments were.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's just, I love that. I love that. It's beautiful. And, you know, the percentage that you mentioned, Jill, of how much is in, you know, history books, or how much is out there on what the men have created an accomplishment. It's just not out there about the women. This is really going to help with that.
This is going to help with that. And really, for many, many years, until really the 1960s with the feminism movement, the primary people who educated and wrote were men. I mean, as documented in this book and as people can read about in many different sources, I mean, education was closed to women for a long time. And women actually had to fight for the right to for an education. That's actually one of the grievances that's listed in the Declaration of Sentiments, which is the document that was issued at that 1848 First Women's Rights Convention. Women didn't have the right to an education. Women didn't have the right to vote. Women didn't have the right to own property. Women didn't have the right to their children in the case of a divorce. I mean, I'm still of an age where women couldn't get a credit card. Women couldn't get a bank loan. Women had to get their father or their husband or their brother or their ex-husband to sign for them to get a bank loan so that they could get a car after their divorce or they could go to school. This is not something that had just miraculously happened. And it's not something that women haven't even had the right to vote for 100 years in this country. And so there are still, I still collect information. I get an article, I read a lot. I look through all kinds of newspapers and magazines. Almost once a week or once a month, there's a new first for a woman still in 2017. So these battles that some maybe younger women think, oh yeah, all of these battles are fought. Well, no, all of these battles are not fought. We still have a long way to go. I write when I sign the book for many young women, I write, continue to pave the way, because we are not done. There's still so much more to do.
Yes. There's still so much more. And I remember in my restaurant days, you know, I started working in a restaurant as a teenager and ran it, and then had the opportunity to buy it. And I went to the bank. Well, I always paid my mortgage and paid my bills, but I didn't have credit cards. I just was a cash person. I'd pay my bills. I went to the bank and they said, oh, little lady, you want to buy a restaurant? Yeah, right. You know, and kind of laughed me out the door. And I bought the restaurant. I had I loved all my customers. It was a large restaurant, and I had a doctor and his wife who were regulars, and I told him, it looks like I'm not going to buy the restaurant. You know, I had saved money. I had the down payment ready to go. And he said, why? And the owner wanted a higher down payment. And I told him, and the next day his accountant was at my side door with the paperwork, and that customer co-signed a loan for me to buy my restaurant. I mean, the faith. But a year later, he was off the loan. I ran the restaurant. But, you know, Jill, even as I went from the manager, I had managed it for several years, and went to the owner, there was a difference in how I was treated by some of our vendors.
Right.
Some were like, really? You're the owner? Not the guy over here, your chef? You know, you're the owner? It's, you know, and that wasn't that long ago.
It's not that long ago. And one of the things that I also say, and what you have said reminded me of it, and that is that women have to remember that these kinds of things are still happening, and that we need to support other women. There's a very unfortunate behavior that some women evidence that's called the queen bee syndrome. And that's, I made it, I worked all by myself, I fought through all those barriers, I'm tough, you're going to have to do that too, and I'm not going to help you. And we have to stop that. As women, we have to get to the point where we are working together. The men are always working together. The women have to work together. The women have to support each other. There are, as I'm learning, as I become more global, as we all become more global, the women in, pick any other country, the women in Iraq, the women in Afghanistan, the women in France, the women in Japan, the women in China, they want the same things that we want. They want peace. They want stability. They want their family to be able to be safe, to be able to be educated, to grow up, to have a better life than they did. And once we understand really that we are all looking for the same things, then I think we can get to a really much better place in the world.
I love it. I love it. Jill, we have about 2 minutes. Please share with everyone how they can purchase your book and find out about your speaking engagements, and any last words.
All right. So my website, the one that's most, I have multiple websites, but the one that's most applicable to what we're talking about is www.herstoryaTimeline.com. HERSTORYATIMELINE.com. There's information about speaking engagements. There's information about all of the topics. There's information about the book. You can order the book from any online bookseller. You can have a bookstore order it for you. HarperCollins published the book, and so it's available. I speak all over the country. I love to speak. It's very fun for me to tell these stories, to see the validation that telling these women's stories provide. And so I would love to be contacted. There's a way to contact me through the website. My email address is jill@herstoryaTimeline.com, and anyone is welcome to contact me and help me spread the word about women's accomplishments.
Yes.
When Rosie Rios, the Treasurer of the United States, was in Seneca Falls to talk about putting women on the money, and Harriet Tubman's going to be on the 20, she said her high school professor looked around his room in 2015 and looked at all of the posters around his room, and there were 0 women. There can't be. There aren't 0 women, and we can all start telling women's stories and writing women back into history.
Yes, I love it. Yes, support and information. Jill, you are awesome. I just have to say, you are so awesome. I am so honored to have met you and connected with you.
Well, thank you. I so appreciate the opportunity to have been on your show, Paula. It's been so much fun.
So happy. And to all the viewers out there, thank you for joining us. Love, hugs, blessings. Jill, love, hugs, blessings. Have a great day, everyone.